I've spent the last decade helping private equity firms and PE portfolio companies hire execs into leadership roles. Think CEOs, CFOs, that sort of thing. The one thing that I've observed is that most mistakes, or hiring mistakes, I should say, are not made because someone selected the wrong person. Rather, it's something entirely different. It's a mistake in the process. It's spending too much time focusing on the selection and not enough time up front worrying and focusing on the actual process of hiring. In this video, I'm going to outline the top 7 mistakes that I've observed over the last decade. I'm Ken Canera. I'm the CEO of ECA Partners. We are a specialized executive search firm focused on private equity portfolio companies. We've worked with over 400 private equity companies. We've done over 4,000 searches successfully to date. Let's jump right in. The first big mistake that I've seen is just starting with the ideal candidate profile. Right out of the gate, jumping into this CFO needs to be based in Reno, Nevada. They need to have 20 years of experience. They need to have experience working with a private equity portfolio company in the manufacturing space. We will get to that, and that is important. But by doing that, you're actually pigeonholing yourself to different markets, different candidate pools, that sort of thing. Instead, start with objectives. So what does success look like in 30, 60, 90 days? What does year one successful look like? So start with the business objectives first and then move to the ideal candidate profile. This goes nicely into the second most common mistake that I've seen, which is not mapping the market. Essentially what we mean by mapping the market is after you've determined the high-level business objectives of what good looks like, essentially, the next thing that you're going to want to do is identify your search strategies or candidate pools, whatever you want to call it, but essentially pick 3 pools or more of candidates that you want to pull from. These should ideally be different industries that are exciting to you. I'll give you an example from a search that we did in the multi-site veterinary care space. The first focus area obviously was going to be exactly that. So direct competitors, multi-site veterinary care. That'd be number 1. Number 2 was going to be multi-site healthcare in general. And then the third bucket was actually going to be retail. So multi-site retail locations. And the reason the client and ECA decided to focus on this particular strategy is because there's a lot of interesting things that can happen by looking at unique candidate pools. In this particular case, there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from the retail industry that we might want to bring over to the multi-site healthcare space. The third thing is that I see, and I see this all the time, is not using a scorecard. What do we mean by a scorecard? Whenever you're doing any kind of search, again, we want to determine the high-level business objectives, then we want to figure out what the ideal candidate looks like in terms of experience, that sort of thing. And then we actually want to prioritize and weight those things. That's called your objective criteria. And then we want to conduct the interviews in a way that tests those objective criteria. The reason that we want to do this is that way we can get an apples to apples comparison across all candidates. And what you'll find is by doing this in a very disciplined way, you're keeping yourself as well as everybody on the hiring committee honest about how we're prioritizing different things, so how we're weighting different things, and then how different candidates map to that prioritization and how they score. The fourth thing, and this one's kind of funny, and I've been guilty about this too, is what I call lying about what the job is. Okay, obviously, I've never lied about what a job is. We've all conducted searches where maybe the role doesn't seem as attractive to us as it would be to a candidate. And so we want to embellish it a little bit, make it sound a little bit better. But this creates actually 2 problems. So the first thing that it does is you're actually totally working against yourself. Sales 101, right? The more someone seems super excited about something, the more we get a little bit suspicious. We've all seen that overly excited car salesperson, and he just can't wait to get you into that car. Honestly, all it does is make you question, and you do not trust this person. Second problem that it creates is that if you actually hire someone successfully and you've not been super upfront about what the job is, then you're going to have a host of issues on day one. It's going to be a total misalignment in terms of what the candidate thinks the job is and what you think the job is. A little bit of a pro tip, if you think you've got like a role that you don't find particularly attractive, just lean into all the reasons that someone shouldn't do the job. This is actually going to have the exact effect that you want, and it's then you'll get the candidate telling you why they actually like doing the things that you think are challenging. The fifth thing that I see is when interviewers discuss a recent interview with the person who's scheduled to interview the candidate next. Let's just play this out as an example. I have an interview with somebody. It goes great. I'm really excited. And I message my colleague on Teams, hey, you're not going to believe it. The candidate was great. They did all these wonderful things. That doesn't sound that harmful, right? It sounds like you're just sharing your enthusiasm. Actually, what you're doing is really biasing the next interviewer. You could be biasing them in a positive or a negative way. So if the next interviewer doesn't think too highly of me, and I've just sung my praises about how wonderful this candidate is, you might be inadvertently biasing them in a negative way. And conversely, and this is the more likely scenario, if you talk about how great an interviewee was with one of your colleagues, you're essentially biasing that person for the next round of interviews. And imagine what happens when a senior person does this with a junior person. The junior person is naturally going to want to make their boss happy. So if they think that their boss likes the candidate, they almost feel like they should as well. Try not to do that. I know it's hard, especially when you're excited about a candidate. The next one would be what I call everybody gets a veto. Imagine a scenario where you determine who the interviewing committee is going to be, and then everybody on the committee basically gets to say no. You can imagine what's going to happen here. Maybe there's 4 or 5 people on the committee and one person doesn't like them. Guess what? You're going to have a very, very lengthy process. So that's number one. Number two is you're just setting yourself up for failure because there's going to be great candidates that not everybody likes. What I would suggest is early on in the process, determine who has a vote, who has a veto, and who has a voice. You can have people in the process that have a voice, but don't even have a vote. Figure that out up front and not on the back end. The next problem that I see is related to the one I just talked about, and that is having way too lengthy of an interview process. This can be for a variety of reasons. This could be because you've got folks on your team that are just not meeting with the candidates and don't have time. It could be too many cooks in the kitchen and too many people involved in the decision-making process. Whatever it is, time kills all deals, and the same is true in recruiting. If there's a candidate that you're excited about and you know that they can do a great job, you don't need to see 30 more candidates. That is only going to reduce the chance that you actually hire the person that you want to hire. Think about real estate, for example. You go to look for a house with a real estate agent. The first house they show you is your dream house. You absolutely love it. You want to move in today. And then you tell them, actually, no, I want to see 10 more houses. The reality is that house is not going to be available after you've seen those 10 houses. Same exact scenario is true in recruiting. When you find the candidate that you want to hire, make a move. Do not wait. If there's one thing that I've observed after over a decade working with private equity and private equity portfolio companies on their most senior leadership roles, it's that most hiring mistakes do not happen as a result of picking the wrong person. Rather, it's a process defect. There's something inherently wrong with the process. Maybe it's bias, maybe it's they're not using a scorecard. Whatever it is, 1 or 2 of these mistakes could create weeks, months added to your hiring process. I'd recommend before launching your next search, taking a step back, seeing where there's potential issues in your hiring process. And if this video is helpful, please give us a like or subscribe. And remember that every week I post about private equity, portfolio operations, talent, and executive search. Thanks so much.